The Galactic Academy's Hall of Species Studies thrummed with motion. Seated in a ring of terraced benches, young minds from 37 starfaring civilizations crowded together, horns, feathers, shells, skin, scales, fur, and chitin pressed side by side in anticipation. The lecture hall itself was a marvel of biosensitive architecture. It adjusted humidity, gravity, and atmospheric composition per seating zone. Around the hall's circumference, glowing script in over 80 languages pulsed on interactive panels, translating every word that would follow. At the front, Professor Crix prepared the day's lesson with a dignity honed over decades. His cranial plates gleamed from a recent molting cycle, and his long forelimbs clicked softly as he arranged his notes, not out of nervousness, but reverence. Today's topic required care. Not all students would enjoy what they saw or heard. "Settle," Crix said, voice amplified gently by the hall's acoustic resonators. "Today we address predator hierarchies." The room responded with murmurs, a few excited tail thrums, and one audible exhalation that smelled unmistakably of sulfur. "Let's begin." The chamber dimmed. Above the professor's head, a hollow projector unfurled a dazzling display. First, a projection of the Tarvex Leaper, a serpentine ambush hunter from the crust seas of Zeland VI. It coiled and struck with mathematical violence, its curved jaw teeth snapping through simulated prey. A few students near the Zeland zone clacked their approval. Next came the Gorthox Talon clan, high-gravity pack carnivores. Their holographic display showed calculated formations, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated feints. A Nyraxi student barked in pride, thumping her chest plate. Each new predator flashed across the hall, acidic flyers from the Molton Abyss, silent web-slingers of Rethcon orbit, heat-sensitive swamp stalkers from Verdanth Prime. With each projection, the energy in the room shifted. The air grew more competitive, more primal. Predators sat straighter, eyeing one another. Prey species tucked limbs closer, posture cautious. Then the hollow froze. "Now," Crix said, gesturing, "we conclude with something different." All lights brightened slightly. All eyes turned. There, halfway up the amphitheater's slope, seated in a gravity-neutral zone and surrounded by empty seats for cultural comfort spacing, sat a single human. Alex. Brown hair, regulation uniform. No posture of arrogance. His hands rested on his knees. He didn't look back at them. A short silence stretched, then laughter. Nervous, then sharp. A scaled student from the Parthelian belt hissed, "Is this a joke?" "Was the translator glitching?" muttered a Threnny bioluminant, her frills rippling violet with confusion. Professor Crix raised one long finger. "No error. This is Alex. He is our final case study." Murmurs surged like a wave. A few students hissed among themselves, offended by the comparison. Others squinted, searching Alex's stillness for some hint of threat. He didn't move. "If any of you feel your own species belongs above the human on the predator hierarchy," Crix said, "you are welcome to demonstrate." It was tradition in certain sections of this course, a cultural exchange, a measure of dominance, not of violence, meant to show the behavioral intensity of predator species. The first to stand was Jurix, a Tholgan ridgebeast descendant with thick bone plating over his shoulders and glacial patience. He dropped down the stairs slowly, rhythmically, thumping each foot in a display that mimicked his species' territorial march. His throat sac inflated as he neared. Alex didn't blink. Jurix loomed, then lowered his head until his gaze was just inches from Alex's. His secondary eyelids snapped in and out in a quick flare, a challenge sign. Alex blinked, once, slowly. Nothing more. Jurix straightened and returned to his seat without a word. His tail twitched faster than before. Next came Lorel, from the flame worlds of Harkun. She burst forward with a screech, leaping from a mid-tier bench and flaring her heat frills, creating a thermal signature that was both dazzling and aggressive. Alex remained still. She circled. Screeched again. For a moment, it looked as though he might shift just a lean, but he didn't. Lorel froze mid-circle, then hissed softly and returned to her section. Her gaze no longer lingered on him. A third student tried Axe from the predator moons of Sindar, whose species communicated threat through eye contact. He locked gazes with Alex, pupils flaring in dominant cycles, neck flexing. Alex stared back, not challengingly, not coldly, just present. Axe looked away first. It was happening. Each failed display didn't just diminish the aggressor, it magnified the stillness of the human. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't dismissal, it was something worse. He wasn't engaging because he didn't need to. The room quieted. Professor Crix waited another few seconds before stepping forward again. In the study of predator hierarchies, he began, there exists a known behavioral model. The apex predator, in many ecosystems, does not respond to threats. It doesn't posture. It doesn't waste movement. Not because it cannot, but because it calculates no gain in it. He turned to face the students directly. That calm is often a greater threat than any display, because the predator that sits unmoved when others lunge, that is a predator who knows it doesn't have to. The silence deepened. Humans evolved not as the fastest or strongest, but as the most adaptive. They chased prey to exhaustion. They used fire. They turned stone into weapons and wind into sails. Their planet tried to kill them with ice ages, viruses, predators, famine. It failed. Alex had not spoken, still seated, still motionless. Crix gestured to him once again. Would you care to elaborate, Alex? A long pause. Alex exhaled through his nose, then slowly lifted his gaze toward the professor, not the room. I don't enjoy this, he said, voice level, being a case study. But I get it. The room listened. A few students leaned forward. I'm not the strongest in this room, I know that. Not the fastest. My muscles tear. My bones break. He paused, then added, easily. A flicker of discomfort passed through the hall. But we adapt. That's our thing. We survive in deserts. We survive underwater. We survive in orbit. We survive in Antarctica. We learn. We try. We fail. And then we try differently. And we keep trying. His eyes moved, scanning the room now. We don't sit at the top because we can't be beaten. We sit there because we don't stay beaten. He looked back at the professor. Which is why I didn't move, not because I couldn't, but because none of you were a reason to. No anger, no boast, just calm. The words were not loud, but they hit harder than any roar. For the first time all session, the prey species stopped looking afraid. And the predators started to. No one moved when the lecture officially ended. Not even when the hall lights rose back to normal spectrum and the translation nodes softly pinged the session's close. Students remained in their seats, some blinking slowly, others flicking eyes or antennae toward Alex without meaning to. Professor Crix didn't dismiss them. He simply stepped back, folded his lower limbs beneath him, and watched. In the third tier, Ketan of the Muroth Confederacy coiled his sleek body tighter. His species descended from rapid-strike aerial ambushers, infamous across the spiral arms for their 2-second conflict resolution methods. Ketan had once struck a moving shuttle turbine to win a bet. And yet, that stillness. That human had shown nothing. No threat pheromones, no tensing of muscle, no defensive posture, just quiet endurance. The idea made Ketan's dermal feathers prickle unpleasantly. What if it's a trick? He muttered, not meaning to speak aloud. Next to him, Uval of the Shilar broods didn't answer. Her species were not predators, but herbivorous gatherers evolved on nightmare worlds where everything around them was. Their survival depended not on confrontation, but detection and avoidance of danger. And Uval, with every millimeter of her being, wanted to be somewhere else. Because everything about the human's calm reminded her of things that came just before a landslide or a carnivore's ambush, an unnatural quiet that made the bones feel hollow. Down below, Alex rose. It wasn't fast, just a motion to stretch the back, after sitting too long. But the reaction was immediate. 3 students in predator zones flinched, then looked around as if to blame others for it. Alex didn't seem to notice. He walked down the steps toward Professor Crix, each step deliberate, natural. Students parted for him like he was carrying an open flame. "Thank you, Professor," he said, and offered a small nod. "You spoke well," Crix replied. His voice was neutral, but he made no effort to hide the hint of academic satisfaction in his throat tone. Alex turned to leave. The real class began then. By the next rotation, Alex had become something else entirely. Not a curiosity. A presence. Word spread across the different dormitory sectors. Human student, doesn't move, doesn't flinch, speaks like a rock thinks. Some dismissed it as theatrical nonsense, others weren't so sure. In the carnivore lounge, Jurix tried to laugh it off while chewing through a bowl of high-density protein bark. It's a cultural thing. Their kind evolved that response. Stillness. Blanking. No, said Axe from the Sindar Moons, voice flat. That wasn't blankness. That was awareness. It's submission, another offered. But no one met his eyes when he said it. The following week, the behavioral studies module shifted into a new lab rotation, stress environments, and cognitive resilience. Professor Crix, sensing an opportunity, adjusted the coursework slightly. Today, he announced, you will participate in controlled micro-challenges, each exercise designed to trigger predator or prey response under simulated threat. Pairs will be randomized. There were protests. You're blending instincts, a student hissed. That's the point, Crix said, gesturing the override. One pairing, specifically, froze the room. Alex, paired with Ketten. A quiet hush overtook even the lounge zones. Ketten stood like a coiled whip beside the human. His wings were partially open, not in threat but as a safety measure, just in case. Alex offered a small nod. Not friendly, not dismissive, just acknowledgement. Their task? A standard module, navigate a closed room as it randomly changes pressure gradients, temperature, light levels, and emit unpredictable bursts of threat cues. The goal was simple: reach the other side without panicking. Easy, on paper. Inside the chamber, the first few moments were uneventful. White walls, sterile light. Then, the temperature dropped suddenly below freezing in 2 seconds. Ketten hissed and flexed his joints, trying to keep circulation active. Alex pulled his jacket tighter, jaw set. Then the light changed. From bright to full-spectrum strobe. A shriek blared from a wall panel, recorded predator vocalizations from 39 species. Ketten dropped into a half-crouch. Alex squinted but kept walking. The room changed again, scent bursts. Fire, rotting meat, scorched bone. Ketten paused. Alex didn't. At the end of the module, both students exited. Ketten's posture was slightly unbalanced, wings tucked close. Alex's face was pale, his hands were shaking. He didn't hide it. But he had kept moving. Outside the lab, a relic student leaned to her friend. He didn't win because he's better. He doesn't break where we expect things to break. The friend replied quietly, that's worse. Later that cycle, the Academy Infirmary records noted mild frostbite on Alex's right hand and elevated stress hormones. He received care, compression wraps, nutrient fluids. No one treated him like a hero. Least of all, himself. But he came back to class the next day. When asked why he didn't file a complaint about the stress test parameters, he blinked, then said, "What's the point? We were told it was hard." He wasn't being dramatic. He meant it. Uval, the Shilar student, found herself watching Alex more than she liked. At first, it was defensive instinct, like how her ancestors watched cloud shapes for signs of dive predators. But over time, it shifted. She saw the limp that hadn't healed fully from the frostbite. The way Alex didn't hide his injuries. The way he didn't turn his pain into pride or weaponry. She found herself thinking of a Shilar legend, of the beast that weeps while it walks and never lies down. In their next species exchange discussion, she asked him directly, "Why not show more strength? Why endure pain silently? Isn't that what predators do to warn others?" Alex paused, then gave a tired half-smile. Because strength isn't always about what you show. Sometimes it's about what you survive without showing it. She didn't sleep well that night. Neither did many others. By the 4th week of the module, Alex had become a gravitational center in class discussions. Not by choice, by pressure. He never interrupted, never demanded space, he just held it. And slowly, that space warped around him. Predator species started double-checking their body language near him. Prey species walked closer to him in shared corridors. It wasn't respect. It wasn't fear. It was adjustment. Adaptation. Professor Crix noticed it, of course. It was why he never stepped in. A lesson was being taught far better by silence than words. He ended one class with a final projection, not of a predator. Of Earth. A planet with no planetary apex species, only one species that refused to stay beaten. In the image, humans were climbing mountains, diving into oceanic trenches, launching rockets into vacuum, not dominating, enduring. And, as the projection faded, Alex remained still once more. Not out of defiance, but because motion was not required. Not when stillness had already moved the galaxy. Weeks passed, but the memory of that class of Alex, unmoving as frilled giants and apex beasts tested him, did not fade. It settled into the bones of the academy, a quiet pressure that hummed just beneath the floor plates. Nobody spoke of it directly anymore, but they all felt it, like a low-frequency vibration you could never quite unhear. Even Professor Crix began walking slower near the human studies zone. The behavioral exchange hall, once a buzzing center of cultural sparring, grew more careful in its pairings. Not because Alex was feared or avoided. He was still invited, still answered questions when asked. But now, when he entered a room, there was always an empty seat beside him. Not for safety. For space. Ketten noticed it first in himself. He'd begun watching how Alex sat, not slouched, not hunched, just present, fully there. That kind of physical patience made Ketten's skin itch. His own species lived in perpetual motion. Watching Alex was like watching a coiled spring that didn't need to snap. And then one day, he did snap. Not at anyone. At himself. It happened during a reflex challenge module, low gravity, sensory interference, surprise movements. The objective was simple: anticipate the threat cues and avoid physical contact with the moving obstacle. Ketten failed, twice. And Alex, stationed nearby as a timing observer, said nothing, just tapped the console. Ketten hissed, "Do you ever fail?" Alex glanced up. "Sure. You hide it well." "No," Alex said, "I just don't shout about it." Ketten leaned closer, feathers flaring. "That's not strength, that's repression." Alex's jaw twitched. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just choosing where to put my energy." Ketten didn't reply, but he logged out with more force than necessary. Later that cycle, he reviewed Alex's medical file, available under the Academy's Open Study Ethics Clause. The frostbite had only recently healed. Nerve regeneration therapy still ongoing. Mild permanent sensitivity in 3 fingers. Muscle strain in 1 leg from a lab injury weeks ago. And Alex still showed up, walked, wrote, Saturday upright. Ketten closed the file and stared at the screen for several long breaths. Then deleted the shortcut to it from his console. Elsewhere in the academy, things were shifting in quieter ways. Uval began sitting closer to Alex during lectures. She claimed it was due to acoustic clarity. His sector of the seating bowl was quieter, but Crix noticed the way she angled her chair slightly toward him. In a cross-species ethics seminar, a Sarnathi student asked the panel, "How do we define moral responsibility in predator societies?" Alex didn't raise his hand. The professor looked his way anyway. "Alex," he hesitated, then said, "We learned it the hard way. When you get too good at surviving, you start to think everything else is expendable. Took us thousands of years to figure out that domination isn't sustainability." Silence again. The kind that had weight. Crix let it sit there before moving on. By midterm rotations, word of Alex had spread beyond the behavioral studies curriculum. The engineering cohort invited him to speak about human mechanical intuition. He declined. Twice. The third time, he agreed. He didn't say much, just talked about wind tunnels and water pressure, about how humans built aircraft before they understood lift, about learning by failing over and over and still going back with better duct tape. "It's not magic," he said, "it's just not quitting." One of the mechanical students later recorded that session. It got shared across 7 different species forums. Views weren't the point. The comment sections were. Dozens of students from cultures that valued strength or strategy began whispering about something they hadn't considered before: The power of failure. Survived. Not avoided. Survived. But the myth of Alex nearly unraveled the day of the trauma simulation drill. It wasn't planned. Not entirely. The simulation dome was being used for a survival scenario. Teams dropped into a recreated alien wilderness, assigned different roles. Alex was on a 3-being team, one insectoid, one amphibious, and himself. The mission? Find shelter and return a sample without losing any team members. 10 minutes in, Alex fell. It wasn't dramatic. A hidden crevice under a patch of moss. He stepped wrong, dropped 6 feet, landed badly. Pain shot up his right leg like a scream. He knew instantly something was wrong. He tried standing. Failed. The others scrambled down, but neither had hands suited for lifting. The insectoid, Tekra, began panicking. "This breaks the assignment. We're penalized." "Calm down," Alex said through gritted teeth. "It's just a sim." But it wasn't just a sim anymore. When medbots arrived 6 minutes later, they found Alex still trying to pull himself upright using tree roots. Pale, sweating, breathing slow and shallow. The scan showed a fractured tibia. Real pain. He was stabilized and evacuated, given immediate care, and fitted with a temporary exobrace. He didn't return to class the next day. Or the one after. In the absence of movement, his stillness was finally understood. Not chosen. Earned. And the fear that lingered in lecture halls gave way to something more complex. Students began asking questions not about dominance, but about resilience. Not about posture, but about healing. Axe, the eye-stare predator, visited the medical wing once and left without saying anything. Ketan came twice. Uval stayed long enough to speak. She sat beside Alex's bed and said, "You should have called for help sooner." He shrugged. "Didn't want to waste time." "You could have made it worse." "Azar." "I knew the signs. It wasn't compound, no nerve loss." She frowned. "So, you evaluated your own injury while in pain?" Alex looked at her. "I've broken bones before." She stared. "That's not normal." He blinked. "It is for us." And that, more than anything, made the room feel colder. Not because he boasted, but because he said it like it was just life. Professor Crix received permission to visit Alex 2 days later. The room was quiet. Monitors glowed softly, tracking vitals. The brace on Alex's leg had a transparent frame, pulsing gently with electrostim signals. "Crix, Saturday. You shouldn't have continued moving with a fracture," he said after a moment. "I didn't," Alex replied. "Not once I was sure." Crix tilted his head. "Pain does not teach faster if it's endured longer." Alex exhaled slowly. "Sometimes it's not about what teaches you. Sometimes it's just about getting through it until help arrives." Crix looked at the human for a long time. "You have changed the nature of this course," he said. Alex gave a half smile. "Not on purpose." "That," Crix replied, "is precisely why it worked." By the time Alex returned to class 10 days later, walking with a slight limp, the seating arrangements had shifted. Not officially, but enough for the space beside him to remain open. Not for distance, for respect. In the next dominance display module, no one volunteered. Not because they feared him, but because they had begun to understand. The predator who doesn't need to move is not resting. He is recovering. And he will rise again. The final weeks of the semester came faster than expected. Assignment deadlines, simulation debriefs, language exchange summits. A slow panic crept into the student body, not about grades, but about what came next. About returning to homeworlds, or ships, or military placements, all while carrying something they couldn't quite name. Something they'd learned, but not from a textbook. Alex walked without the brace now. His gait still held a subtle unevenness, the kind only those paying close attention would notice. Many did. No one mentioned it. The last class of Professor Crix's series was always reserved for a capstone demonstration. Normally, students would design a theoretical scenario, multi-species encounters, ecosystem balance equations, diplomatic predator-prey crisis models, and then present in teams. This year, Crix deviated. Instead of team simulations, he said, Each of you will select a behavior observed this term and analyze its role in predator hierarchy evolution. Cross-species applications are encouraged. A buzz moved through the room. Alex, seated at his usual place, didn't move. He already knew what his would be. On the day of the final presentations, the hall was full. Some students from unrelated disciplines came just to observe. Others, faculty members, curious to see what had stirred so much across the academy this cycle. The early presentations were solid, technical, data-rich, safe. Ketten's was good, a sharp dissection of the flaws and reactive aggression when facing unorthodox prey. Uval's was better, a detailed breakdown of psychological space in predator interactions, citing human posture as a nonverbal dominance paradox. Then Alex stood. He didn't bring slides. No dramatic visuals, no pulse map diagrams. Just a handheld terminal and a chair, which he moved to the center of the open floor before sitting down. "I'm not going to theorize," he said. "I'm going to tell you what happened when I broke my leg." Silence fell instantly. In the moment I knew it broke, I had maybe a minute before shock set in. My heart rate spiked, my muscles locked up. I had to breathe through the nausea, all while trying to assess if it was compound or not. I've had one of those before, this wasn't. A few students shifted uncomfortably. I told my teammates to keep moving. They panicked. I didn't. Not because I'm brave, because I've panicked before, and I've learned what happens if I do. He glanced around the room. I didn't roar. I didn't scream. I didn't freeze. I made a decision. I waited. And I endured. Professor Crix didn't move. His eyes were locked on Alex's. The human continued. "That's what this course has been about, hasn't it? Predator hierarchy, apex dynamics, dominance behaviors. But you all keep looking for what moves, who bites hardest, who runs fastest, who stares the longest." He paused. The real predator isn't the one who reacts fastest. It's the one who decides when to react. Alex stood, slowly, weight balanced evenly now. And sometimes, it's the one who doesn't react at all, because survival, when it really counts, isn't about power displays. It's about what you can take and still get back up. Then, a final nod. "Thank you." He returned to his seat. For the second time that semester, the room sat in silence. No clapping, no vocalizations of approval. Just thought. After class, students dispersed slowly. Conversations were hushed, speculative. Some avoided eye contact with Alex. Others looked directly at him, as if finally seeing the thing they hadn't known how to name. Not threat. Not weakness. Constancy. Crix approached him near the back of the hall. "I've had students quote theory at me for years," he said. "Very few live it before they understand it." Alex gave a small smile. "Wasn't the lesson I expected?" "No," Crix agreed. "It rarely island." He hesitated. "There's a saying from your world, isn't there, about the quietest person in the room?" Alex nodded. "Still, waters run deep." Crix's mandible twitched in a movement just short of a smile. "And sometimes they drown the unprepared." Alex didn't attend the farewell ceremony. Too many lights, too many forced farewells. Instead, he went to the training yard, a quiet dome on the far end of the campus, where gravity could be adjusted for endurance drills. He walked the loop, slowly, hands in his pockets, thinking. One by one, students found their way there. Not to confront. To walk with him. 2-5 Haven is no one of the Tammany round. Ketten first, then Yuval, then Axe. Tekra limped along the outside rail, his species unsuited for even minor gravity shifts, but he came anyway. They said nothing. Just walked. One loop, then two. Each step a beat in a drum they'd all heard, even if from different angles. They were no longer testing him. They were pacing him, matching stride for stride. Weeks later, long after the students had dispersed to their next assignments, and new cohorts filled the academy's corridors, a quiet note was added to the internal curriculum ledger for Professor Crix's course. A new theory submission. Anonymous, though the handwriting was human. It read, "Apex predators are not defined by dominance displays, but by how little they need to display anything at all. The top of the chain is often occupied not by the loudest or strongest, but by the one still standing when everyone else is gone. It was signed only with a single word: endured. And in every species zone of the academy, that word became a whisper, not in fear, in recognition. The predator at the top had never moved. But now, no one doubted he could.